Good afternoon. I'm Jim Eskin, and as founder of Eskin Fundraising Training, it's my privilege to welcome you to our 114th webinar in our nonprofit empowerment series. In our virtual learning community, we have the entire family of the nonprofit sector, including CEOs, executive directors, directors of development, other staff, board members, volunteers, donors, and other friends of the nonprofit community. Before I introduce our special guest, who's been a special guest before, I'd like to introduce you to a teammate of the Eskin Fundraising Training. Randa Luna is a regional coach for the Institute for Philanthropic Excellence. She was in San Antonio. She ran north to Austin. Randa, welcome. And could you take a moment and describe the work of the Institute for Philanthropic Excellence?
So the Institute is a national consulting firm, sort of equal parts educational institution as well, really focused on empowering typically small and mid-sized nonprofit organizations through like a major fundraising project, or typically it's their first capital campaign or something. And what I like and appreciate most is that we don't just give advice. The whole point is that we really partner with each organization, embrace the values, working with the team really closely, and then
let's sing your fingernails and see if they're dirty.
No.
Because you get in the trenches, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we do. Trying to really help make a positive impact. Yeah.
Thank you. We're going to bring Randa on in a few segments later in the show. Our special guest is a good friend and colleague that Scott, I remember our first meeting in the summer of 2009 at a Starbucks. I think it was at Bitters in 281. I didn't know who you were. You didn't know who I was. And it was the beginning, I guess, of that line, a beginning of a great relationship. Scott began his marketing and promotion career with the launch of the independent television station KABB, and is it 1985? After 20 years of successful broadcast marketing and promotion work, Scott made the very significant move to the nonprofit sector as a consultant for what then was called the San Antonio Nonprofit Council. He was hired as executive director in 2007. In 2015, the San Antonio Nonprofit Council became the Nonprofit Council and opened their membership to all 501c3 organizations in an effort to expand the nonprofit service and membership throughout the South Central Texas. Scott, that's as much time as I'm going to waste bragging about you. He is he is the CEO of the Nonprofit Council, and I think it's a perfect fit to talk about today's topic of Stronger Together. Scott, so what do you say? Welcome back. Thank you for sharing the most precious gift of all, your time. And let's start with basic. Can you tell us about the formation of the Nonprofit Council?
Yeah, and I give the abbreviated version. It was formed in 2003 as a 501c3. It was started in the late 90s loosely as the executive director council under the United Way.
So I didn't know that. There's volumes that fill up what I don't know, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was. Again, there was the funded agencies, the executives got together monthly, talked about issues, things that impacted them. And then they wanted to do some advocacy work at the state level when some issues around child abuse and neglect, CHIP and Medicaid were going through the legislature. And at that time, the United Way wasn't necessarily a fan of lobbying and advocacy, so they decided to move out and expand the reach beyond the 68 delegate agency executives and formed the Nonprofit Council. And as you mentioned, it was the San Antonio nonprofit council
Yeah.
because it was just Bear County
Yeah.
and primarily just San Antonio.
Yeah.
And fast forward to today, we've gone through a lot of changes and programming and added more benefits to the membership. And it has gone from 22 agencies when I started consulting in 05, 06 to now just over 250 members.
That's fantastic. Scott, what are some of the most prominent challenges you've had to confront in moving the nonprofit council forward?
I think one of the first challenges was taking an organization that was free for their members to participate in to charging membership dues annually.
Hey, why don't you write a book on that subject?
That'll be a podcast that we were talking
Okay,
about earlier.
okay.
That's but yeah, they're and they were really on the verge of closing the doors, and that was the reason I was hired to take an assessment of the organization and find out should it continue or do they really just need to dissolve it, because the executives, the board at the time, they were running their own organizations and running the programming. So there wasn't a lot there for really, if you were going to go from zero to paying 500 a year, why would I do that when there's nothing
Yeah.
different going on? So it took us a few years to map out a strategic plan of programming and adding benefits, and we're still doing that today. It's an evolution that it will not stop, because if it does, then we're not growing.
Yeah. Scott, how many other organizations elsewhere in the country have a similar mission of facilitating nonprofit collaboration do you know of? And do you all have an opportunity to learn and grow and exchange experiences with them?
I don't know how many there are. I know there have to be more like us. I know there are state associations across
Yeah.
the country. The National Council of Nonprofits, which is a national organization, which we're a part of, Independent Sector, which we're a member of. So I do get connected nationally through some of the work that those folks do and committees that we're involved in. Locally in Texas, in fact, in Austin, there is One Voice Central Texas, which is the most similar organization to ours that I have seen, because it's the executive directors and the CEOs that are their members. And that's the same with us. We're not, like some of the national or state organizations, the agency is the member, and the point of contact may be development, it may be marketing, it may be the executive. With us, our audience are the decision makers of these organizations, and that's where the power of our collective comes into play. We've got the voices, we have the collective voices of over 250 nonprofit leaders who know what's going on in the community based on the work they're doing at the ground level.
Okay, let's put you in the hot seat. Nonprofits compete fiercely for gifts of time, talent, and treasure. And this is an excruciating dilemma for donors who are not choosing between the good and the bad, but are choosing between the good and the good. What do you think are appropriate boundaries of fair and ethical competition in the fight for finite donor resources?
Well, that's a good question, and it's one that has been asked as long as I've been in the sector, almost 20 years now. It hasn't changed. I think, look, I think there's always good that comes out of healthy competition.
Yeah.
I will say there are way too many nonprofits that are competing for money and funding, individual donations.
Particularly in the same mission space.
Well, that's it. Yes. And I'm personally, our organization gets at least one or two calls a month from somebody that wants to know, how do we start a nonprofit?
Oh, it kills me to hear that.
And our first answer is, what is the mission?
Yeah.
And when they tell us, 100% of the time,
Yeah.
it's like, well, first of all, we have multiple members in our network that have the
Yeah.
same mission. And so, then we go down the path, but everyone thinks they can do it better and they want to do it better. And if people would just realize, pull their resources together and go
Absolutely.
volunteer or go help sit on a board of a nonprofit, that's a great way to do it rather than start your own.
Yeah.
It's
Now, during my fundraising career, I was no angel. I loved competition like you, but I always felt more comfortable advocating for my nonprofit and keeping away from talking about other nonprofits, And I didn't find, like, when people buy a car, they probably go to multiple dealerships and, and try to play one off the other. I seriously, and maybe I'm naive, I did not see that happening in my 35 years working for higher education institutions.
Yeah, I can't speak to the higher ed. I know it's a different animal.
Yeah.
Look, I will say that the entrance of social media, the
Yeah.
entrance of giving days like the Big Give,
Yeah.
have transformed a lot of agencies that otherwise wouldn't have the resources or capacity to raise money like they do if before there was this, connectability virtually for so many donors and nonprofit organizations. And, the Big Give, those online giving days, they're competition, but it's not, I mean, it's friendly competition. I mean,
And I have a
it really
sense,
is.
that you're growing the pie together.
We're trying, our community, I will say 10 years now of the Big Give, and you can go down the street, you can go into any coffee shop, and I guarantee you 9 out of 10 people that you ask, do you know what the Big Give is? They would have no idea. So we're not moving the
Yeah.
needle on the impact that this day should bring. And I think a lot of that is, well, there's a myriad of reasons, and there's
Yeah.
a large reason, but we won't get into that today.
Okay.
But we
We
still
will
have a
talk.
lot of growth there.
Yeah, we'll talk a little more specifically about the Big Give. Over your career with the Nonprofit Council and its predecessor organization, do you seen more or less in the way of communication, coordination, and collaboration among nonprofits?
Oh, we see a lot more.
Hmm.
We see, I see it within our group. I mean, my
Yeah.
context is, we're very fortunate that we have, like I said, the number of agencies that are members of ours, and we provide them with that connectability to one another through an email platform. And they are constantly sharing ideas, asking for information, policies, not necessarily around funding, but however, there may be funding issues where they're not getting reimbursed for services quickly enough from maybe the federal government or city government. And is there anything that, the council can help advocate for? So, yeah, I mean, I think that is partly collaboration, and they're sharing information with one another because, they want the sector to be as strong as it can be. And
Yeah.
you can't do that if you're isolating yourself.
Yeah. That moves nicely to our next question. What do you think prevents nonprofits from collaborating even more?
Sometimes boards might get in the way.
Whoops, I didn't laugh. Okay.
That we have seen before, especially when it comes to not just collaboration, but sometimes when merger discussions or are being discussed
Yeah.
at the executive director or CEO level, and then it goes to the board. It sort of derails at that point, and or programs that they want to merge together and share. That could be a roadblock in itself. Egos have something to
Yeah.
do with it. Some founders of organizations that have not left their organization,
Yeah.
have just a little bit more ownership in it
Mhm.
than those of us that didn't found the organization and want it to move on, maybe. And there's a life cycle to
Yeah.
a lot of smaller organizations. And I used to say that about ours. There may be this life cycle. We haven't quite, I don't think, hit the peak yet. But there were times over the 20 years that, and we celebrated that last year, the 20th, that, we had discussions at the board level of what really is our
Mhm.
game plan here.
Mm.
And now we're in a good place, and we've been in a good place the past 10 to 12 years. And again, I think we have a lot more growth to go.
Yeah. What are some of the proudest examples you would like to highlight in the arena of nonprofit collaboration?
Well, for us, in our organization, and forgive me for talking a lot about our largest program, the Big Give, but that gives us a lot of context with collaboration.
And
because
that's $45 million now, right?
Yeah, over 45 million in 10
Wow.
years that the
Wow.
nonprofits have raised.
Yeah.
We've given them the tools and the platform and the marketing, but they have done the heavy lifting. But that all was born out of a collaboration.
Mm.
It was Linda McDavitt from the Orsinger Foundation
Great lady.
coming to Dennis Knoll back when he was the
Yeah.
CEO of the Area Foundation, and myself, and saying, Austin's doing this incredible day. It should be done here. There's no reason it can't be. And both of us were like, well, I don't want to do it. Well, I can't do it. And so we put our agency's resources together. I was one person back then.
Huh.
And for many years, I'd say the first 5-6 years, we were partners in that endeavor, and it made it stronger because of that.
Hmm.
That's a classic example.
Okay.
It was nothing and again, it wasn't ego where it was like, oh,
Yeah.
I want to do that. Let the nonprofit council is going to do that. We don't
Yeah.
need anybody. It was like, they're a powerhouse foundation. They've got the staff and resources. We have got me as a marketing person and, knowing kind of the landscape. And that's what made it a great partnership.
Hey, let's keep you in the hot seat. What are some of your disappointments as far as nonprofit collaboration?
There haven't been many. So I think of the Big Give as a total collaborative effort for all the nonprofits, and years ago when we had a lot of prize money at stake and you could win a lot of money, there were agencies that really didn't see the real reason to participate in Big Give. They saw it as a sole way to gain prize money and really game the system. And that was disappointing. It was just a handful, but competition is great, but sometimes competition brings a little bit of, unscrupulous activity, let's just say. And that's why, we turn to match minutes. Those are equitable. There's, it's like the donor goes in, they make the donation, and if they get matched, great. If they don't, they made the donation and they were happy to do it. But, Jim, I don't, on our end, we don't see a lot of the fruition or the work behind the scenes that is happening with collaboration. I just know we
Yeah.
see conversations from our members talking with each other to help one another. And I think funders have done a fairly good job over the years of creating, and government too. ARPA money is the exact example of that. Some of the funding, they were looking for collaborative proposals.
Yeah.
So, a lead agency getting the money and using partner agencies to help make it
Yeah.
a better, more robust program.
Yeah. Um, you continue to be in the hot seat. More and more we are more and more we are seeing mega donors. It used to be, I think, an 80%, 80-20 break. 80% of the gift income came from just 20% of the donors. And now I see that might be approaching a 90-10 break, where 90% of the gift income is becoming from only 10% of the donors. Do you have concerns with that trend?
You're talking individual donors.
Yes.
That is a trend. And I know that there have been studies and reports nationally, in fact, with GiveGab, now Bonterra,
Yeah.
that runs over 250 giving days, civic and education over the country. A lot of the markets are down as far as individual donations and donors. We are really fortunate here that we have not seen that
Mm-hmm.
dip of individual donors. I think we're fortunate, and I think San Antonio has always been an island of something. You can't compare San Antonio with a lot of other cities as far as,
and we're going to get into that a little deeper in the discussion.
yeah.
Okay.
I have not seen that here. I look, things can happen on a dime. This year, we're a little worried because it's an election year. And that the last election cycle, when we were looking at Giving Day, we did take a dip.
Yeah.
Because it runs close to the election. People are worried, people are, economy and all of that.
Yeah.
That does take into account. So I think some of it is cyclical. But I also know if you don't ask and you don't continue to go to those donors, and I know I've heard it before, and I continue to hear it, donor fatigue. I am not a fan. I don't believe in that.
Me either.
I believe if donors don't want to give, they won't give. But if you don't
Yeah.
ask, you won't know.
Or the only bad ask is the ask never made. On that point, let us bring in a millennial perspective. Randa Luna. We were saying we had good news and bad news. Can we bring her on camera? Randa has a question to share. Randa, can we bring you on camera? And
Here
there
we
she
go.
is. And we were saying the good news, bad news. The good news is I don't think you're young enough to be one of our granddaughters. The bad news is you definitely are young enough to be one of our daughters. But anyways, with that introduction, the next question is yours.
Well, thanks. So I've spent quite a bit of time in performing arts, as I think you know, probably, Scott. And you've had a really interesting career, and I've been following the Nonprofit Council and the Big Give for years. And I'm curious, while we're talking about collaboration, I'm curious about performing arts, really niche kind of organizations or organizations that may call themselves niche, even if they're not. What kind of unique challenges have you seen them struggle with compared to like a broader organization? And like, how do you encourage them, especially arts organizations who are struggling, to find partnerships that will foster the collaboration they really need to ultimately achieve that broad impact we're aiming for?
Yeah, I have seen through the fundraising efforts of various categories, animals animal organizations are just an anomaly when it comes to online fundraising. I mean, they really are. Most are. Their donors are passionate. You know, you
By the way,
you
on
adopt a
that note,
dog.
I got to inject that we just celebrated our cat's 14th birthday yesterday. And so it was a big day at the Eskin household.
See, and Jim, I'm sure will give to a cat organization on the next big give, and he probably
Yeah.
has. And I haven't searched his name from the donor report, but I will. But I also hear, so every organization is different, but I do know over the years, and we did some trainings on, you know, who's your audience, who do you reach out to, your donor base, and Randa, a few years ago, two arts organizations came up to Mercedes and I, and they were like, well, you're telling us to go after, you know, to reach out to our volunteers, our patrons. Those people already support us by volunteering their time, and they're paying for tickets, and they already attend our events. Well, attending an event is different than making a donation
Yeah.
to your agency. And that disconnect, and this is not a general across the board arts, you know, comment, but the disconnect for those agencies was you are missing your donor base. Your patrons are your donors. And if you haven't asked them, you need to start asking them outside of that kind of, you know.
And I would say too, your patrons are also a prime audience for legacy giving.
Yes.
Big time.
Yes. Plus
Just-
arts organizations have, I mean, I'm like, y'all have the capacity to be like really creative with your, you know, social
hope.
media, with your marketing, you know, you can put on a show during, I don't know, there's so many things. And I think in the collaborative space, you know, I've not seen a lot of that with the arts organizations, and I think it lends itself because of, you know, shows and things like that. I know with the city of San Antonio, they're very fortunate here that there's a, you know, the city funds through the hotel motel tax, entertainment tax, which is very fortunate, but that's just one funding stream. And we all know after the pandemic, if that was your only stream or a large percentage of the stream, it was a severe impact.
Scott, in my memory, I'm in a senior moment. Did I ask you about the impact of the pandemic?
On this call or before?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you again. If I did, do you think the pandemic sped up or slowed down nonprofit collaboration? Don't you love easy questions?
Yeah, I didn't see either or, Jim.
Yeah.
I saw more. I take that back. With our organization, I saw during April and May and June of 2020, that email listserv that the members share to talk to each other was it was on fire. And it was all centered around how do you go to remote workplace?
Yeah.
Zoom wasn't a thing. I mean, it was there, but no one was using it. And who's using what all of that was happening in real time for our agencies. And I'm not talking just small agencies. I'm talking $4 or $5 million budget agencies saying, okay, our people want to come back hybrid. How is that working? Or does anyone have PPE equipment? Does anyone have masks? I remember Mike Gilliam from the Lighthouse was CEO then, and he's like, we have thousands of face masks. Please, if y'all want to come down, just let us know. We can, you know, we can give you some, and we can charge you like just $1.50, whatever, for a box. Anyway, a lot of that was going on, and it was so wonderful to see because people were helping one another get through it and navigate things that none of us had done
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
So that was pretty special.
Yeah, that was. Hey, we talked about the impact of mega donors. This is flipping the coin. According to Giving USA, I think it was in the year 2000, 2/3 of American households made some type of annual gift to charity. And last year that fell for the first time below one half. Do you have any thoughts how we can reverse that trend?
It all, a lot of that stems from, I hate to say it, it's stock market driven.
Yeah.
It's economy driven.
Yeah.
It's the political climate driven. There
Yeah.
are a lot of things that are out of nonprofit control
Yeah.
that affect that.
Yeah.
And that's why the smaller donations, the individual donors, the megas are great. The foundations, government, so, funding is all a part of the mix, but don't discount those smaller donors that make up
Mm-hmm.
a large portion of what the big give is. Of the
Yeah.
5 million last year, almost 3.5 was individual donations
Wow.
online,
Yeah. And
which
just
is
think
huge for
about,
this market.
yeah. And just think about the impact they can have through monthly giving, a small gift.
Yeah, and you can set that up through
Yeah.
through that platform, and and some have done that.
You made reference to this before. We learned this word Zoom, and that's not to promote a specific brand, expedited, our transition to virtual communication and opened the door to virtual fundraising and solicitations that when I was going and learning the trade 20, 30 years ago, that was taboo. You had to ask in, face to face. What do you think is the future for virtual fundraising and solicitations?
I think giving days, 5 years ago, some people thought the life cycle of Big Give was 5 years. Some
Yeah.
thought it was less than that, some 10. I think, look, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think as long as the community rallies around it and we could nonprofits, as long as they come back to the table and want to participate and they see value in it, we will continue to do it. I think we've got a lot more growth from the community, and I say from corporate and business sectors of San Antonio that still have not really embraced our platform or
Yeah.
our giving day, and not sure why, but it creates a lot of value. It supports hundreds of nonprofits, and that 3.5 million from last year, the donors do come back. They see the platform as secure and easy to navigate. So, I don't have that crystal ball.
Maybe you'll say that.
I think online giving is here to stay
Yeah.
in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
But I also think that virtual like meetings and things like that, people still use that as a crutch. Because
I'll
I
tell
don't
you.
want to drive. I don't want to drive downtown to a meeting. Can I have a Zoom link?
Yeah. 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 Let's go to a sort of a lightning round, and technology has opened the door to more and more ways to communicate with donors and prospects and friends. I'm going to give you a couple different communication techniques, and then we're going to bring Randa in too. But can you give me sort of a plus minus on the following? And let's start with snail mail.
Am I weighing in as do I like
Plus
it?
minus. No, you
Plus.
just comment. What do you like about it? What do you think is? What can you
Okay,
say? You go
I
ahead.
like it. Of course, I'm a somewhat old school. I certainly love email, and I love seeing Facebook ads and things like that from nonprofits. What does irritate me is when the nonprofit doesn't get the name correct, or we're still getting mail from the previous owner of the home
Yeah.
because they haven't cleaned up their list. And that's just, that's, I know that's a difficult thing, but I think snail mail is a little more, managing it is a little harder.
Yeah.
But I do think you should have a mix of that. In fact, we did direct mail for Big Give in August, September to high net worth zip codes to
Yeah.
talk about DAFs and how you could use your DAF to give through the giving day.
Yeah.
We actually saw an uptick in the number of DAF holders who checked out through the DAF feature. No, it wasn't, the year before we had 3, and this year in 23, we had 15.
Yeah.
Is it part of, did we, we spent $1,000. We had 12 zip codes we sent to, and they were in those zip codes.
I just think that trend is going to go up and up and up. Okay, let's try you in another. How about email? And of course, you're like the rest of us. You complain that you don't get enough email each day.
Email, it's hard to get a response via email these days. Am I wrong, Randa?
Well, we're going to bring Randa in a second. Okay?
I know. I see her shaking.
Yeah.
It's like, and these are people I know.
Yeah.
I'm like, then I'm like,
it's Scott. It hurts. It hurts when family doesn't respond to your email, doesn't it? Okay. How about texting?
I'm not a fan of text to give.
Yeah.
How
about texting just to communicate?
I'm okay with that. There's a donor we have that texts and likes text, and I'm fine with that. As long as it's within reason and not after hours. I don't want to text at 11 o'clock at night because I'm not a surgeon.
Yeah.
And I don't do service delivery. Like, I'm not the CEO of Haven for Hope, where there may be like a major issue going on. So, but I'm fine with that.
Yeah. How about social media?
To communicate with,
Yeah.
certainly to communicate. As long as you're doing it, I think if you can place ads, we've found success in that the past 3 years. Although we hired a PR firm to manage our Facebook ads and Instagram, and that's helped us out. But no Facebook message.
Yeah.
No.
How about video conferencing?
It serves a purpose.
That sounds like a political answer, Scott.
It serves a purpose, but as long as it doesn't become a crutch, I would prefer to talk to someone on the phone.
You want to know? I hate to be so blunt, but even men, we don't have to put our makeup on, let alone our other gender. I think phone is less complicated and there are less problems making connections. But I want to go through the same lightning round with Randa as my millennial friend. But I want to say in defense, Randa, my brother, who is 7 years older than me, so he's no kid. And he's smarter than me because you know what he does every day? He golfs every day. So I ask him, I go, Don, why are you texting me? Why don't you send me an email? And he goes, why don't I just drop a letter in the mail to you? That's what he gave me. But let's go through each one of those. As a millennial, what do you think of snail mail?
I know it seems outdated, but I agree with you. Kind of alluded to that, Scott, too, about in certain situations, I think it does make sense. I think it depends on who you're trying to talk to and what you're trying to say. Like, I think sometimes a formal invitation or some very personalized special communication, I think that's appropriate. And personally, sometimes when I get it, I get sort of like nostalgia, and I'm sort of excited to open it because it's novel and oh, look, it's pretty. It's marked just for me if they got my name right.
Yeah.
And sometimes I really like that, but
Yeah.
not too much of it because it's kind of like email sometimes too. There's so many coupons and ads and junk that you
Yeah.
get that for me, it needs to be something special.
How about email?
I I don't know. I struggle with that because most of the time with email, if it's not, again, something that's from someone I know and I'm kind of expecting it, I'm just going to glance at the title. And if it doesn't draw me in for whatever reason, I'm probably going to delete it. There's just so much coming all the time. You get subscribed to lists you didn't even intend to subscribe to. And there's just too much of it. I do think that it's effective because it gets the information out, and it's also something Scott said earlier. If your donors are giving to you and they're engaged, then they'll probably pick it up and pay attention to some of your emails, especially if you've got a good subject line.
Yeah, good point. How about texting?
I don't love it for fundraising, although I do love it for like fundraising events. When I go check into something, I love it when I walk into an event and I check in and it's like, welcome to the gala or the whatever, or the opera.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah, I think that is so cool. And I don't mind if I'm at the event and they send me a text and it asks, would you like to contribute to whatever cause while you're here? I don't mind that. I'm already there. I'm in, baby. I'm happy to get your text message. That is cool. And occasional communications are fine, but for generally, like for fundraising, not so much.
Let me ask you, I hear a lot of people say, I have too much email to deal with, so I prefer texting. But doesn't that beg a future in which more people are going to be texting? And, what are we going to do next? Smoke screens? I hear a lot. I can't keep up my email, so if I want Scott's attention, I'll send him a text. Well, when we keep on texting Scott, all of a sudden he's going to have as many texts as email.
Yeah, exactly. I like to, it depends on the person. And that's really hard. I struggle with that, not just with donor crowds or ticket buyers or something, but with boards too. Who prefers which communication method and which one reaches them first? Because some people, like me, I get all my emails on my iPhone, and as soon as I see that red dot, I got to check it. I got to at least read it and see what it's. So I will see your email, by golly. Doesn't matter when, I'll see it. But some people will wait until they have 1,000 stacked up, but they might see your text if you text them. So it's hard. That's really challenging for anybody to keep up with who prefers which method.
And what about social media? I mean, I'm going to sound like a dinosaur, but, I don't want to blame your generation and maybe even go further back to Generation Z. Why do they want to communicate by LinkedIn rather than send me an email or phone me?
I think LinkedIn at least gives the impression that you have some privacy left, that you haven't had to give away so much personal information, or that's how I've looked at it sometimes. Certain contacts, I really don't want you texting me at 10 p.m., but we can communicate on this platform that is specifically for professional kind of communication. And that's a little bit easier to handle. And it can be the same. Some people have professional accounts on other social media platforms, and I think it works kind of similarly there. But I don't like, I do like doing ads, like Scott mentioned on social. I think but I think that is one of the only ways for it to be really productive because it's so hard to cut through the noise.
Okay. And finally, how do you weigh in on video conferencing? When is it absolutely necessary to go video conference instead of just a cell phone call?
Absolutely. I don't know. I like video conferencing. I mean, I get Zoom fatigue, if there's just.
It's easy for you to say. You always look good.
Well, there's filters on Zoom,
Oh, I need to start using those. I'm telling you.
Okay. But I think that for me, I mean, I'm working remotely a lot. I'm here today and this is convenient. I didn't need to drive and spend time in my car. I didn't spend any money on gas. There's a lot that it's helpful with. So I really like still video conferencing, but I will say I work in a hybrid environment all the time
Yeah.
because it does get old. You do get exhausted staring at the screen, especially if
Yeah.
you've got back-to-back meetings all day. So
Yeah.
in person is still, or phone calls or in person, both are still really valuable ways to communicate.
I, for better for worse, advocate that you should plan your video conference donor meeting for about 2/3 the length of an in-person meeting, because it's absolutely more exhausting.
Yeah.
There's no relief,
Yeah.
there is no distraction. It's just you and the other party. Tell you what, I'm going to both of you go through another lightning round. When I think of Scott McAninch, I don't think there's an event that you haven't met yet. I don't know if there's an event you don't like, but I think that you all have experiences with every type of event there is. And Randa, I want you to share your perspective as a millennial. Scott and I have been to a few more rodeos, but Scott, what's your experience? And you can say, has there been a shift? But what are your thoughts on breakfast as an event type?
Oh, I like breakfast meetings. I like breakfast events because it catches
Because
me, because I can go on my way into work and then leave from there. It's
and you're
just, it's
fresh,
convenient.
you're fresh too. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, how about luncheons?
Look a
How
little
about
better.
yeah?
Lunches, lunches I'm okay with. I really am. I can get away. I eat lunch every day, whether it's at my desk or, if we have a lunch
Yeah.
meeting. So I'm fine with that.
I think it's incumbent a lot nonprofit to really manage the time of these events. Scott, you all are excellent at that.
Well, yeah, and I went to one in November that went way long, and they've been doing this for quite a number of years. And it's like, you gotta, as long as the program, if I'm going to be out at 1:30 and it says I'm going to be out at 1:30, you got to
Somebody's
honor the
going to play.
guests.
Somebody's going to play bad cop. Eventually. Usually it's staff, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, you got to get the big hook and like, come on,
Yeah,
get off
because it
stage.
kills me. You're honoring someone who gave you, say, $10 million, and then you promise the event be over at 1 p.m. and then at 1:05 the room is half empty. It kills me to see stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't like, I won't leave early. I mean, I'm hard pressed to leave early. I know I've been on the event side
Yeah.
and I feel bad, but if it goes longer than, like 30 minutes and I'm like, all right, I'm out. This one went 30 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Receptions.
I would prefer lunch or breakfast. A reception is better than a dinner.
Yeah.
I'm just not a dinner fan. I like cocktail reception, things like that.
Maybe you can get home while there's still some light too.
Yeah. That helps. That's just a personal opinion.
How about
We're
virtual?
fortunate we don't have to do that.
Yeah.
We don't do
How about virtual programming?
Like in a virtual
Meeting or virtual speaker or virtual, yeah.
I'm okay with a virtual meeting. I'm not webinars like this, yes, because it can pull different
Particularly
people
Jim Eskin's webinar.
Of course. I can do it at home. I came home early,
Yeah.
I didn't want to fight traffic after it was done. So that beautiful. What I don't like is my board meeting being split.
Yeah.
And I know for some people it's hard and they've got to zoom in. But it's just hard to manage a hybrid meeting situation.
Yeah.
If you don't have a really good setup, and we don't, the council doesn't have I was at family service the other day for a committee meeting and it was beautiful. And we were hybrid and I'm like, I'm gonna come down here and use my board meetings here. This is fabulous, but when you don't have the right setup, it can be challenging.
Yeah. Okay, let's get a millennial perspective on these different type of formats. What does a millennial think of breakfast?
I don't mind them. I kind of don't like getting up early, but in my particular position, I also have a 7-year-old who's got to go to school in the morning, so I'm up anyway. So for me, it's kind of like it's not that bad to drop him off and then immediately run to a breakfast.
Yeah.
And being a hybrid worker now, it is actually kind of convenient because then it gives me this window of time, while the kid's at school to set up some more in-person meetings before I trot back home and make that commute. And then that way it doesn't end up being like a big event where I've got to like prepare, commute, go spend an hour and a half and then commute. And then it's not as big of a deal. So I don't mind breakfasts. I think they're okay. They're early. I might be a little,
Yeah. Okay. We'll give you an extra cup of coffee. What about luncheons?
Luncheons, the same deal. It's a little bit more difficult because I tend to schedule a lot of other stuff during the lunch hour. Where I'm at in my career and my life, I attend a lot of these types of webinars or seminars, and they tend to be between like 11 and 1. So for me, doing a luncheon is a little bit more difficult because I feel like my schedule is always so stacked. I really appreciate sort of an early or mid-morning event, or just something quicker.
Where are you in receptions as a young parent?
As a young parent, it's tough. On the one hand, depending on what it is, I can make a whole evening out of it and make it something that I'm getting to go out to do. But it's sort of the same problem with a lot of things. If there's too many, they stack up and I end up having like 4 nights in 1 week that I could be gone. And that's just really not realistic.
Yeah.
So for the most part, I turn those down unless it's really, really special.
Yeah. What about virtual programming?
That I am all about right now. I know it is exhausting, being on the screen.
Except this
looking at the
one.
screen all
Except this
day.
one.
This one's perfect. Yeah, Wednesday at
Hey.
4 is awesome. No,
Yeah.
no, I do. I can do pretty much any virtual event. It feels to me right now like it's the most accessible option.
Yeah. Yeah. I got a real difficult question. First of all, John, we haven't let the audience in. Is there anything in the Q&A box? And then I'd like you to put Scott's contact information because we're not going to let him hide. And then I have a closing question for both of our people here. That's very intense.
Yeah, no questions yet,
Okay,
Jim.
let's put up, Scott, it's okay, we put up your contact information. And for better or for worse, you can email, call them. I guess you can text them. You can do any of those things, he said. Okay. There's his information.
Yeah, you can actually text our office and I get that text. So.
Okay. And I know he's pretty excited. First of all, Scott, thank you for the leadership that you and Mercedes and the board and the entire nonprofit council team, because you have really grown the pie in San Antonio. And I mean, $45 million for the big give is a lot more than chopped liver. But I like ending with the toughest question. And so I think I'll start with Randa, okay?
Good.
49ers or Chiefs? Who's going to win?
I have not really been paying much attention. Maybe I should say, is Chiefs the popular answer?
No, you're on your own. I guess a millennial might be real interested that
if you're a Swifter,
Taylor Swift is playing in Tokyo
Taylor
the night
Swift
before.
fan,
yeah, you're with KC. Scott, is it going to be 49ers or the Chiefs?
So it will be, I believe it will be the Chiefs. I'm rooting for San Francisco.
Well,
young quarterback, is astonishing what he's done. But I'm sure it's going to be the Chiefs. They're just a better team.
I don't know. I mean, it's just hard to bet against Patrick Mahomes. I think the
Yeah,
49ers are a better team, but I don't know how you beat Mahomes, you know? If
well,
they're down, yeah,
I don't know. He's had some bad games, and they all have, but anyway.
yeah, yeah.
It's going to be a good game, though, and for sure, it's going to be.
And do you think Taylor Swift will be there?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Randa,
She's
you think
jumping
she'll
on
be
that
there?
private jet, and she's gaining time
You
as she
know,
moves
yeah, I
forward.
think it was CBS did a count. They zoomed in on her celebrity booth, I think, in the last game 17 times. You think she's getting enough attention?
I mean, she doesn't need it. She's
Well,
she's helped the NFL more than
yeah,
they're
vice
helping her.
versa. Well, the Time
Yeah.
Person of the Year. Well, first of all, Randa, again, thank you for sharing your wisdom and perspective. And Scott, it continues to be a privilege and pleasure to call you a friend and a colleague. And I've seen close up what you have done to make our nonprofit sector stronger. So thank you so
Thank,
much for all you've done. Okay. And to your
well,
team.
thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate being on here. And Randa, it's good to see you again.
So
Yeah,
I'll
you as
tell you
well.
what,
Thank you.
this is what we're going to do. We're going to post a very brief summary on social media of 5 main points. And then John Largent, our producer, who's CEO of Game Day Media, who, by the way, did a year-end podcast in Jay Leno's garage, which is one of the biggest garages on the planet. Uh, he will do a spin drive, and we hope to post the recording sometime tomorrow morning. Okay. And by the way, more people, Scott, will watch the replay on demand than will watch us live. So that's a very important part of this. So again, to everybody in our learning community, you are special to us. Thank you for the way that you share your time, talent, and treasure to touch, improve, and save more lives. We'll see you in 2 weeks, and we will say be well. Thank you, Scott. And that's it. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye, everybody.